So good afternoon, everyone. So let's go with the next panel. My name is Vincenzo Casillo. I'm principal at Cedar, and I'm very pleased to invite on stage Mr. Rajesh Mirjankar, CEO of Kiya.ai. For joining this session and very, fantastic and exciting video. So congratulations, actually, because we know that Kiya is actually the first company in India who launched Metaverse, so it's great accomplishment. And the panel is actually very much the open banking and Metaverse today. So I will just get some perspectives from you. So Metaverse, okay, so how is the technology transforming the future of banks, in your opinion?
If we look at the base definition of what Neil Stephenson wrote in his novel, where he inadvertently mentioned the word metaverse and then it got picked up many years later to be then deemed as the future. It was originally seemed as a virtual world which sort of brings together multiple worlds. And when we look at the actual implementation of how metaverse is, I think when we conceptualize this as the future of web, so to say, it will then bring across the concepts of Web3, where you'll have decentralized databases. There's the whole talk about creator economies, the fact that, how we've discussed in the few panels before as well about fintech, how customer experience can be enhanced, etc. And I think what Metaverse provides is the opportunity to enhance the customer user experience. And importantly, collate data seamlessly from the backend. So let me put it in perspective for banks. With the what's driving Metaverse today, because the book got written many years ago, and somebody got motivated to change the name of their company, that pushed me to then say that our platform that was extended reality is actually a Metaverse, because what it was is providing a virtual world. But nobody would buy it if I said it was extended reality. Right. So when we look at the entire concept, 5G and IoT together is one trend that really pushes the metaverse in the front. Data speeds that were classically 20 Mbps at the most to 40 Mbps in a good network are now going to move to 600 Mbps, or have moved in many jurisdictions. Netflix has come forth and said that now you can download a movie in 3 seconds. So what's a bank going to say? Will their app work faster? Can then the customers click faster? It's not going to be possible. You can't run digital banking 10 times faster. So what is going to change actually is the customer user experience. The graphics, the fact that you'll have more hyper-personalized environments being pushed forth to you, your choice of what you call as your digital assets, those are what will define customer user experience in banks in the future. And I think that's where Metaverse will redefine some areas of banking, but it would transform various others. As we go through the session, I can probably put that in perspective with
Absolutely. No, thank you. And how do you think that open banking actually supports Metaverse, and what are the challenges that you see?
Very well. So if you look at what open banking brings forth, it's I would say a big leap when it comes to how banks looked at data management. If you look at any app, any system that banks put forth to the customer or to themselves, let's say from interdependent databases, the need is for a standardized way of accepting data. The need is for being able to, first of all, get the data. And that is a clear challenge that open banking sort of meets. It right, sort of eliminates the challenges of data access. So if you look at the concept of open banking, where what you want is a customer logs in and he's able to then find data ubiquitously across on the app. So in India, it was very well achieved with the UPI. You had a handle, and just providing that handle gave us access to banks, accounts in different banks, all in one app. So one had to conduct payments. They could just go to that particular app and get the payments done. They didn't have to worry about logging into multiple apps through multiple mobiles, because sometimes you have device linking and SIM card mapping and all of that, which would then have that issue about how many apps can you have on a phone, or how many accounts can you drive from the same app of the same mobile. Can I have my child's account and my account on the same app? All those challenges were being thought about. When you look at UPI, it sort of resolves a lot of that. And then you look at the role of fintechs. You now have, like Sriram put it, is that you have the aspect of taking hyper-specialization of each vertical and being able to provide to the banks an ability to solve a challenge. Open banking is then able to sort of provide those through a common interface to be able to resolve it.
Yeah, in fact, I was coming to the other question, which is actually how can the open API layer on the banks can be leveraged by the Metaverse?
Yep.
Yeah. And so do you actually believe that Metaverse offers opportunities only for retail customers, or do you believe that there are also opportunities for corporate?
So I'll start with my concept of the Metaverse first, and then come to the retail and corporate as well.
Please.
When we look at how Metaverse has been perceived today, many of the institutions believe that gaming versus can drive the Metaverse. And I think that's probably a misplaced opinion. I wouldn't say it's wrong, but it's misplaced that that's the only place it can happen. Because gaming versus have a particular sect of customers, a particular segment of customers, which are not your 100% customer profile for future. So when we look at the ability to service customers through the Metaverse, it has to be perceived with the view to say, if the Metaverse is the web of the future, then where am I going to get a starting point? If you look at most of the banks that have started their Metaverse today as the first experience, in fact, some have gone on to lend a complete brand to it, of this is the Metaverse for us. They've actually started with a lobby. That reminds me of the days of 1989, where you had Yahoo with a single page, and you had ads there, and you could put up your name of the product, and all you had to do is buy pixel space at there. So the big firms were able to buy more pixels, and then Yahoo said, yeah, I'm falling short of the million, so they added more pages. That's how it became a portal, and then came the streams. And for someone to say, okay, that's where I'm going to start my Metaverse, is I've got space on somebody's 200 brands, and I'm going to now be one of those brands in a particular piece of land and push my goods from there, is not the view of what I see as the future of Metaverse. In fact, the way I would perceive Metaverse to be is to say that we go one step forward from where you are today in digital banking. You've got open banking, you've got the ability to integrate fintechs. Next what? So what is the customer experience with all this that you've built so far, rather than going back to the 1990s? So when it comes to retail, certainly there are various aspects of transforming the way banking is provided. I think across the Metaverse, the first concept that banks should look to deliver is delivering banking as a service. And not to say that that will be the avatar or that will be my specific digital asset, but across the metaverse, if I were to say that I had a Web 3.0 architecture and I had access to multiple metaverses in the final conceptualization of how metaverse is seen, you should be able to provide that. The second part, coming from how then retail moves to corporate from a perspective of benefits, corporate banking has a lot of use cases that aren't resolved today within digital banking itself. So what I call as digital banking is the whole concept of omni-channel and open banking. You have several unfulfilled customer journeys within the corporate world, be it in trade finance, be it in onboarding, where you need to say, okay, sorry, we'll take a break here because my mobile can only deliver so much. You can only give so much from your mobile. The rest you can do from your laptop. And sorry, laptop is all they can get from there. Now, please come to the branch to do this. And I would believe that any metaverse journey has to sort of eliminate those challenges. So the future of web should be something that is taking all of these use cases to the next leap rather than going backward and coming forward.
Right. Yeah, before I go ahead with the next two questions, I'm just wondering if meanwhile maybe the audience would like to submit any queries or has any questions for us.
Rajesh, hi, Murtaza here again.
Yes.
So is this metaverse, according to you, I mean, going to be more targeted to Gen Z or Gen Z plus one, whoever comes up next, rather than the older ones? Because it's all too new age. You're talking about gamers being the first one on it. And so who do you think is likely to be the first early adopters of accepting a combination of metaverse and digital banking, open banking put together?
So we've done about 12 POCs that will translate into deals. We've signed up with a global bank. And I can tell you the only reason we did that is because we showed them how to make money, which was what was spoken about, right? How soon can you make money from this? There has to be a business case. The Gen Z business case to convert gaming to revenue is a long-standing one, right? And again, there the user experience has to come to that level of gaming. If you look at most metaverse platforms that are on gaming today, I don't want to name them, but the platforms on which they are built, you cannot integrate a single line of banking code into that. They are not PCI DSS compliant. So when you look at providing secure banking, leave alone the web pages, you'll have to start thinking, if I want to take the next step to it, is that possible or not? That's where most banks have sort of stopped at that point in metaverse, and those who then graduate to the next point use the word crypto. I'm not saying it's a bad word, because that is what motivated people to get to the metaverse. But all I'm saying is that crypto is not going to drive the metaverse. So when it comes to Gen Z, I think there are use cases that will come up, which we've certainly focused on, which are the additions, or these are the plus points. Like for example, let's say if you take a simple fund transfer, I'm just giving an example here, to say that if a fund transfer happened and I could leave a message and the avatar of the mom comes and says, hey son, happy Diwali, or happy Eid, and you've got the funds popping up in your account. So the moment you see that fund message coming up in your wallet in your metaverse, you click that and mom's avatar has come up saying, wishing you a happy Eid. You know, and that is just a different concept of how you would visualize the metaverse. To say, yes, it did make a difference to the son to say, you know, sitting back in UK or other places where you're studying, you got a message that was hyper-personalized. Because it was not the money, it's also the message. So, but coming to the actual type of how we see metaverse being driven is from where money is made. I would say classically in the areas of corporate banking. I'll start from there because that's the toughest use case to get to. So in corporate banking, at least one of the banks that we'll sign up in UAE now, it's a complete customer onboarding on corporates. Multiple SMEs across multiple jurisdictions in GCC should be able to then get onboarded, irrespective of who the authorized signatory is from, or rather from which jurisdiction they are, to follow that activity. Because the back-end rules for onboarding are already resolved, whether it's FATCA CRS or whether it is the journeys to say validation using UAE pass or what ID documentation is all resolved as of now. What we need is the open APIs to say integrate these gateways and how do you resolve those journeys. So those are some things we've rendered. The second fact is about marketplace. One of the important aspects of what Metaverse can offer when you look at the classical use of Web 3.0 architecture to say creator economy, what's a classical creator economy? It is the one that can drive a marketplace. So in India, for example, you have ONDC, which is a classical way of how buyers and sellers are coming on an open network, simulating or emulating what UPI offered to payments and doing the same thing for trade. Now, can a bank benefit from that? Certainly. Instead of just saying I'll provide the UPI for moving funds from A to B, you can say I now know what is working capital in this for this particular seller. I can see the orders pour in, so I know how much of velocity of trade is there, so I can probably give a higher limit. Those are aspects that banks are able to take decisions today being on the metaverse. So I think the beauty of the metaverse are two. One, you're able to see more, and two, you're able to listen more from what's happening. Another example I would say is in a corporate example, the ability to provide marketplace then renders us to conduct trade finance. Take a classical example of how trade finance works today. The bank gives an LC at a stage when they're only owning the risk, not the information. Whereas if it was run from the metaverse, they would be having more information on saying how did the transaction actually happen, how are the goods going to move, can I offer insurance, can I price the product differently, all of that can come in play, which is not possible either in the digital world or in the way manual banking is done.
Thank you. Is there any other question? Yeah.
Yes, my name is Mustafa. I'm from Soha International Bank. I wanted to ask about the governance aspect. Now, today when we talk about conventional bank, we're restricted by a physical location. But when we open the metaverse, there are no boundaries. So who should ideally govern this entire transaction? This, I think, also applies on cryptocurrencies today. But given that we're moving so much more towards the meta, where should it be governed? Where should that central location be?
Good question. I think if we were to look at how even you would drive a web, for example, that if I logged in from here, it would be one domain, and if I logged in from the US, it would be a .com and things like that. So if it's in the same manner that if I were to base about where the customer is onboarded onto, that should be the point at which the governance is done. I give you the example of the SMEs being onboarded in one single metaverse, or rather the instance, but across multiple countries. They will be governed by the jurisdictional laws of those countries in which they are residing or want to conduct business in. And that is something which the banking rules are already laid out. So I think the metaverse is purely a way of presenting it in a single window with how multiple databases can come together. Rather than telling the customer that you approach my Dubai branch or approach my branch in, let's say, Riyadh for this business, sitting in Muscat, you should be able to say that I can help you get all of this because guess what? The metaverse has got links into the distributed databases, the decentralized databases, as well as the control points to onboard you from Muscat. So to answer your question, the metaverse isn't a virtual branch. The metaverse, how it is seen in gaming is, yes, it's a virtual world. But how we've really looked at the implementation of the metaverse is it's a presentation point at which a customer can approach a bank universally, bank or a merchant or anyone universally, but is getting the service under the laws of the individual jurisdictions where the service is to be provided. A classical example is, let's say, if I sold a particular brand of a shoe on the metaverse. I'll have the ways in which taxation, etc., is to be done to the point of where I want to deliver the goods. Because I'll probably have inventory there, I'll deliver it from there, and hence it's applicable for delivery of the goods from that place. That's how exactly banking would work.
Thank you. I think there is another question.
Hello, my name is Sukaina Abdullah. I'm from Amanir Bank. I just wanted to touch upon how this impacts the ROI inside the bank. So what's the return of investment? How much of reduction operationally that could hit the bank internally? Because we're talking more about customer facing and what could happen in the customer journey.
Yes.
But how does it impact internally as well?
Yes. So I think it's a very good question because that's a starting point for a business decision to hop onto the metaverse or not. And we have done roughly about 12 firm projects for banks on the metaverse. And very soon we'll have onboarded 6 onto Kiya.ai's platform itself. And what we've seen there is that we've picked up the use cases where they are able to say that hopping onto the metaverse makes more sense. Typical examples are about how you present virtual assets. So, when we say metaverse, the concept of NFTs is restricted only to what you see as ownership, that is of paintings and proof of work or proof of stake in various facts of art, music, etc. We've taken it to a point that the NFT is no longer just those, but also instruments in banking that are ownership of the bank, driven on part of the customer, which changes hands with the control in the bank's hand. Now, the way in which you define this NFT itself is able to take away a lot of bureaucracy of how the paperwork is run and gives the ROI. The second point is in the aspect of the digital asset. Sometimes managing paperwork and having to keep it for 10 years, even though the customer is supposed to have that, keeping multiple copies across multiple places is something that you can eliminate in the metaverse. Because you are keeping the concept of a decentralized database, and you can keep it at one point and access it from multiple places using just the digital asset pointers to that particular area. And that again pays for one aspect of the metaverse. The third element of ROI is in the level of hyper personalization that you're able to offer and being able to attract a new generation of clients, Gen Z, for example, but also corporate clients that never had used digital with a bank because of its restrictions that it provided. And the fourth, last one I would say, and there are multiple, because I can just tell you, having built multiple use cases, we have about over 130 use cases we've already put live on the metaverse for banking. Happy to discuss that in another forum. But through this, it's just been how we've looked at it, we've imagined how metaverse can be done through the power of a platform. And so I think the ROI keeps coming from there. And marketplace is one important one, where the cost of sales reduces drastically, and the cost of opportunity also reduces drastically. So these are few areas, I would say, that provide ROI.
Thank you. I think we have a question from Chetan.
Hi, Chetan here from Cedar. So one of the key challenge which Oman especially gets into is whenever you launch a new product, service, you need an approval of central bank.
Yes.
And so central bank needs to be educated. They need to think through governance, how this can be a level playing field for the banks. Yes. And then typically give a circular out only when they're fully convinced. So how do you see this happening either in Oman or any other market which you have seen already?
Yes. So when we looked at the product launches in each country that we have been into, primarily we've looked at, first of all, looking at educating people on our concept of the metaverse. Because after all, it started with a book, so I can always write another story to redefine that word, right? So I have that excuse to say I can take the liberties of redefining metaverse till somebody finally says this is what it is. So what we've done is first defined the use cases. Within the use cases, there is this element of saying, when does the regulator come in? Does the regulator come in when you price a product? Does the regulator come in when you execute a product? Does the regulator come in when you conduct transactions? And you then look at the journeys and say, how much of it can you start off with merely providing on the metaverse as a presentation layer, and then extend it as a control point in regulatory sandboxes of the regulators, getting them through that to show the controls. And then the last bit is the transaction. So I'm not saying it's a front leap forward into conducting transactions, because that requires us to probably prove that that instance of the metaverse is PCI DSS compliant, complies with all the audit standards that comply with data secrecy and all the various jurisdictional aspects. So a good starting point is customer onboarding, which has been provided the liberty to be done from multiple points. Classical point of how you can drive the metaverse is also areas where fintechs are participating, because they are not licensed. Many of them are not licensed for certain use cases. And those are something that can typically be coming on the metaverse. The benefits there are, for example, in few cases, and I'm not saying this is issues with the branding, but banks do spend a lot of time in lot of investment in branding. So when it comes to rendering that across to someone who's done it using technology, I always say that the brand supersedes technology, right? Because that's how I would look at saying providing our solutions. We will never provide a solution that supersedes the brand of the bank, because the whole point is the customer trusts that brand. Customer does not necessarily trust only the technology. So when it comes to that, how we look at the metaverse is to say, take all the use cases that the fintechs are providing today and integrate that from the back end, which is open API, as I mentioned. That allows us to provide a single brand across to the customer, no confusion of saying who's the ownership of which product. And I think that would actually make the regulator happy.
There is another. Do you have another question?
Thank you. I just want to pick on that question here, Rajesh. I think what you just said, right? Let's visualize this picture, let's say 5 years from now. Okay, now we are talking about the whole metaverse is actually predicated on an API-enabled ecosystem, right? And you just talked about having multiple fintechs actually being onboarded, and we are talking about a collaborative environment, right?
Yes.
It could take multiple shapes from being a marketplace to actually being, let's say, a cohesive, collaborated go-to-market that is taken to the customer.
Yeah.
Just, if you were to look at this picture 5 years from now, how would you expect this whole metaverse to be unfolded?
Excellent. So that's in fact slide 2 of my sales pitch. So thanks for asking that question. So how we look at the metaverse is that at the bottom layer you have the open API. I'm not coming to the presentation because it's not all about that. At the bottom you have the open API where you are integrating the data in the right manner of how the bank wants to provide it, which is standardized data. At the next level is what we call as the Meta API. Meta API is one that would drive interoperability between the metaverses, so that there is not one single big world that says that now come to me, I will search across all data, I will make sure all your behavior patterns is with me, but not with the bank that got me the customer. So the Meta API layer allows the individual owners to retain their data, but allows interoperability between the worlds. Now at this layer, you have the aspect of even fintechs that get to the Meta API to be able to extend services, keeping the brand constant, which is what is the avatar of the bank or the digital asset in which you came across to get the service. And the third one, I would say in 5 years, as you mentioned, is the aspect of IoT, because that is a hugely undermined point at this point in time. But given 5G in its full stream, providing let's say up to 1 Gbps of sort of speeds, then you would say, why can't you have edge computing taking forth at the helm of affairs? So you would have today, let's say, like I said earlier, simple ubiquitous account like UPI could do 100 billion transactions in a year, right? And they're saying that they will do, NPCI says they'll do 1 billion in a day. And I can see that volume going up there because we manage about 26% of the volumes of what NPCI executes in India. So if it was that, then imagine if you had payments on mandate. So a simple example, 5 years hence or maybe even lesser, you will have cars that will self-charge, cars that will self-drive. Now, will I sit there in the driver's seat when it self-charges and self-drives to just make a payment? I will have IoT to make the payment. And that self-charge, self-drive and self-pay concept will come across to most devices that are there. Today you have barcoding on consignments for trade. So most of the ports you have barcodes that come in. If I had, anyway you have low power cards today, EMB cards. Let me take the cost of that whole box and say, what is the cost somebody can afford to move a consignment from country A to country B? Can they not afford the dollar for the chip and that wire to provide a low power RFC? Most certainly. So if that is the case, you will have 1 trillion devices across, consignments going through ports, and that's why I said marketplace, because there'll be consignments that will say, where is that exactly located? Is it in the logistics part in the ship, or is the consignment in the warehouse, and where is it located? It should be all seen on the metaverse. And that's what I see as the future of the metaverse, where visibility of my assets will not be just digital and sitting on a wallet, or NFTs as how metaverse is shown today by, I would say, the world that has started making NFTs. But it will actually be the visualization as a digital or virtual dimension of an actual physical asset that makes more sense to humans than the virtual assets.
Thank you. I think we are already over time, so I'll go with the last closing question. So top key recommendations for the banks on the way forward, please.
Yeah. So I think one, get to finish your journey on the open banking, arrive at conclusions to say what data you will publish. Second point is to put out on the metaverse the use cases. that you can render the right image in terms of consolidating all the product information that you can have to be able to rendering it as a single point from the metaverse. Not necessarily in one avatar, but maybe different avatars. But it would be someone who would answer all the questions. So in short, your contact center moves on the metaverse, right? This third point is to then look at saying open banking is giving the data. So when the regulator does look at this as being able to secure data with PCI DSS compliance, it's at that point you start providing data to the customer. And the third point, the last point would be actually conducting transactions and business processes. So which would require a sort of a customer journey configurator that is owned by the banks, not by the metaverses providers.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Just give another maybe 5 minutes to the audience for any other final questions. Okay, so thank you so much. It was very nice meeting you.
Thank you.